Was I right? Turtleneck City. And track pants city. Those track pants were out of control. Okay, so welcome again. So a lot of Asian cuisine gets its origins in China, and then it kind of moved outward to the other Asian countries from there, and you've traveled extensively in Asia. So do you find that you're particularly influenced by Chinese cooking?
More and more so. I tend to think that Chinese might have invented literally everything. I joke that even European food comes from China now. But you know, I think the more you study cuisine, whether it's Korean, Japanese food, it all originates from China. So it's always fascinating to watch. Just even like cooking, and I mean, I'm always excited when all the cooking elements in that movie get me excited. So. There's always so much to learn, but Chinese food is one cuisine that I think you could say all cuisines are really difficult to understand, but Chinese food to me is just an enigma.
So you were just talking about all the food in the film, and there's tons of it, and particularly in the beginning, that opening segment. And is there anything in there that really resonated with you the most in terms of you look at it and you think, yeah, this is...
Yeah, I remember. What's interesting about watching this movie is, it certainly was one that was like, yeah, you should try to do this as a profession. And watching them cook, originally, I remember the first time or second or third or fourth viewings, I was sort of in awe, like, how do they make this food? And the difference now is that not that I am a master of Chinese food or anything, but I feel pretty confident how to make all those dishes now. And that's the weird thing, is you can sort of trace back to what you didn't know and what I still don't know, but I sort of have a better idea of how it all happens.
Well, there's some stuff in that you see that is quite unusual in terms of Western cooking. So, you know, like deep frying a big slab of pork belly and then refreshing it in cold water. And I mean, those are techniques that you use in your cooking today?
When I worked in Japan, that was a technique. I worked in a restaurant, but we don't do that today, though.
So Chu, who is the main character, is a bit of a control freak, which is not unusual for chefs to
I think he's quite a normal guy. Seems pretty standard to me.
I mean, he won't even let his daughter in his kitchen. And you run, obviously, many restaurants. Is it tough for you to hand over control to someone else? Because you can't possibly be there for everything all the time.
No, and that's the most amazing thing is we have such a great team, and it's not a singular effort. And it happens over time. I think that the best way I can describe it to you guys is like, all of a sudden, if you have kids or growing up, you all of a sudden don't have parental supervision. You don't know when it happened, but it happened. And sort of that's how I feel about the restaurants. You entrust them because it's just one of those things. It just happens. You think that it's never, ever going to happen. And then all of a sudden it does, and I think it's a testament to the great team we have at all the restaurants.
So people really romanticize cooking as a career. And I'm sure they look at you and what you've accomplished, and I mean, you've accomplished a lot in your career, and they think, oh, I want to do that too. So is there anything that, if you could demystify cooking for a living for people, what would you want them to know?
The cooking process, or I try to dissuade anyone that tries to become a cook these days. Partly because I feel cooking has become, for many things, it's a better environment for cooks. There's more knowledge, but the modernization of cooking today and sort of its mass appeal has brought with it a white-collar work ethic. And it's still blue-collar labor. So that dissonance just doesn't work. And at the end of the day, I think you have a lot of people that are cooking today, young guys and girls that truly feel that they want to do it, but might be a little bit misguided because they now know what's at the end of the rainbow. And before starting cooking, and I sort of got in right at the weird time where if I started, I felt as far as I could go if I started cooking was maybe one day I'll have my own kitchen. I'll be good enough. It was all about being good enough. Now it's about seriously, like how fast can I become rich and famous? And it's a very strange thing. So it's baggage that didn't really happen in a very short time frame of the past 10 years. It's really changed quite a bit. So I'm not, how should I say, it's different now, and it's not that I don't want people to cook, it's just that the craftsmanship of it is a little bit different.
But not everyone's going to reach your level of fame necessarily. How has fame kind of affected the way that you run your business and do your work?
Fame's weird. If you guys all like movies, you probably saw that most recent Woody Allen movie, To Rome with Love, where they have that, I can't remember that guy's name, but he's just famous for nothing all of a sudden. And that's pretty much how I feel about it, about this whole recognition stuff. Certainly it's flattering. I think at a certain point, everybody wants to be respected, but at the same time, you have no idea what kind of baggage comes with it. And I'm sure if you ask all the chefs that I work for, they'll be like, no, David, we had no idea David would be here. And certainly I didn't either. But again, like, if you were an aspiring athlete and you were really good, or say you were beautiful in high school, you might be an actress, actor, whatever, you know what kind of baggage might come with it. I had no idea. Yeah. This is all really it's a very surreal. Also, it's a strange trip.
Cooks, wouldn't you say, have kind of like, I always talk about having a back of the house personality, and there's that kind of like front of the house people who like to be in the center of attention, and chefs generally and cooks generally don't like to be in the center of attention. They are kind of
we're socially inept.
Yeah,
is the more politically correct word. Most of the cooks that I know, for instance, I have a good friend that's opening a restaurant in a city, and I won't say which because he'll yell at me. And all the other cooks and all the other media in town, they're like, hey, what's wrong with this guy? He thinks he's too cool. I'm like, he doesn't want to talk to anybody. But the reality is, I'm like, no, Pete doesn't hate you. They don't hate you. This guy doesn't hate you. He just wants to like do his own thing. And whether it's all these cooks I know, they're all my good friends. When you put us in the kitchen, something happens where people become alive, and it's different. And then when you put us in a social setting, which is totally normal, we just shut down. But you put us in a bar, things are good again. And me talking to you guys, this is all just weird. This is just like me getting used to it. It's all new,
Well, it's kind of like in the film, like they don't really communicate with each other, and they talk through these Sunday dinners.
Right.
And is that kind of how you communicate with, your own family, for example?
Yeah. I don't really communicate. I have many issues. One of them is communication, certainly, yes.
So, your parents, are Korean immigrants.
Yes.
And, did you find that did you grow up, because this film is very much about the kind of traditional Chinese hierarchy type family where the focus is on the family, and then this kind of more Western attitude of these individuals being the focus, coming in and kind of disrupting that traditional way. Did you find that your parents were really supportive of what you wanted to do with your life, or were they more strict and had other ideas of what they wanted you to do?
Well, my dad wanted me to be a pro golfer. He was the original, real Tiger Dad before Tiger Dads were cool on the golf course yelling at their kids. He was in the restaurant business for over 30 years, so when I was younger, a young teen, I had expressed my desire to work in a kitchen, and he did his best to make sure that I would never set foot in a kitchen. I don't have to go into stories, but I can certainly relate to why any chef, or particularly, Chu, would not want his middle daughter to become, no matter how talented he or she might be in a kitchen, you want them to have options. And the last option you want to give somebody is, well, you should be a chef.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I'm serious. It's such a hard profession. I don't think people understand just how unglamorous.
It's a labor of love.
It's so hard.
It is very hard. So in your book, you mentioned that you reached out to chefs in Japan repeatedly, trying to work in a ramen restaurant, and you got zero response. And now you're kind of known in the industry for giving people chances and, helping out up-and-coming chefs. And is that a direct result of the struggle that you met when you were trying to make it in Japan, or is it for another reason?
I just feel that I always like being part of a team. It's always more enjoyable to me. So if we can, we've been very fortunate to have awards and stuff. But what's most meaningful is when I see people go on to do other things. Or we always judge ourselves by the worst things that we do or the worst cook. And I take a much more, not pride, but it makes me much happier when I see somebody that was really bad become very good. So I guess it's that process. I don't know. I like when I think about the restaurant. I think of it more of a uni-mind type thing. So it's hard for me to separate the two.
Right. So early in your career, you worked in a soba shop.
I did.
Because you wanted to learn ramen and you had this opportunity to work with noodles, so you took it. And the chef basically said, you got to get lost because if you're not into soba, you're not.
Yeah, more or less.
You're wasting your time. How do you feel about that attitude? Do you think that it
Oh, he had every right to.
Yeah.
I was a total nuisance to him. I was basically, this guy, Dr. Hosoda, was this famous doctor, and he basically, he was his nephew, niece, or I can't remember what the relation was, but basically he told him he had to take me in against his own, he didn't want to. He had this soba shop with his wife on the first floor in Maiden-Mai, and he had been doing it for like 20 years, just him and his wife, and all of a sudden I'm there, bowling a china shop, asking questions, not doing things. I don't even speak Japanese. I wouldn't want myself around either, so yeah.
So would you say that that's a kind of a fundamental difference between Western and Asian chefs in that they really believe in specializing? You see how in the film there's so much detail and care in every little thing. And even in the filmmaking, they give a beat or two to every little moment, even just, making tea and focusing in on it. And
didn't that look awesome, right?
Yeah, it looked amazing. And it really makes you appreciate it more. And do you think that is a function of, the fact that they're Chinese or Asian in general? Or do you think that is just, is that a good quality to have regardless of what you do?
I think there's I know Japanese cuisine a little bit better. I think that is probably similarities in Korea and China as well. But for instance, if you don't choose the highest form of gastronomy, you're screwed, right? So if you're just making ramen, no matter what, even if you're the best ramen chef in the world, you're never allowed to make any other food in Japan. You might be able to, but nobody's going to take you seriously. Same thing. I doubt this movie, when the youngest daughter and her boyfriend were eating noodles and stinky tofu, if Chu was the guy making the food in the back, I doubt that it would resonate as much, because no matter how great of a chef you are, you sort of have to be at the pinnacle of it. And that's why people view, recently I only think sushi has recently become the high art form as well, but in Japanese food, it really is kaiseki cuisine, and those guys are at the top of the food chain. And it's easier for them to do other things, but someone like Murata-san of Kikunoi fame, who I can't speak for, I highly doubt he'd open up a ramen shop. So there's, I think there's freedom in America, in Canada, even Europe, to a lesser degree, where you have, it's easier to do what you want to do. You're not bound by tradition and, you know, this protocol that's been around for, you know, thousands of years. Like, there's restaurants in, I'm sure there's restaurants in China, but there's restaurants in Japan that are, you know, I know that there's one that's like 1,200 years old. So if you're a restaurant that's 200 years old, that's really young. And that's something as, you know, a culture in America, culture in Canada, I don't think we can quite comprehend. There are restaurants there that are older than our countries.
Absolutely, yeah. You kind of have to take it a little more seriously when you're dealing with something that steeped in history.
Yeah.
So in your book, you talk about one of your big challenges was people coming in to the restaurant, bloggers, and having, you know, criticisms of you, and you say that bloggers are one of your big pet peeves. Is there anything in particular out there that you...
I mean, it wasn't really pet peeve, but it was just, I mean, so much of what happened was right place at the right time. We opened up, July 2004. If I hadn't my choice and I had the budget, we would have had a closed kitchen. It's the same thing with our decor. You know, everyone's like, oh, we minimalist, whatever. It's because we couldn't afford anything. It's really, you know, if I didn't have to speak to guests, I wouldn't speak to guests.
Right.
So
you're known.
I mean, I'm not trying to. I mean, like, I'm not a talk show host. I mean,
you're known kind of for having this temper. Have you tried to adapt the way that you?
Yeah, but a lot of it is weird with blogging. Blogging is such a strange thing because it all happened. I feel like I never have to write a diary about what happened because it's everything that we did was documented because it was an open kitchen. And I was talking to Kino Baka recently before, you know, they just had a, you know, original noodle bar party at his restaurant, the Brooklyn Fair, maybe last night. Anyway, like, it was funny because we were talking, we caught up recently about all the insane things we did in front of bloggers or whatever. We just didn't care. We didn't know that, oh, somebody has a website, you know, like, I didn't even register what blogging was or what the internet did. You know, we didn't really care. The fact that somebody could go on or we even want to write their thoughts and share them with the public was still sort of baffling to me. I guess because we didn't care, it sort of just caught on. And it's not that we didn't want to treat them poorly. There's only a couple that we treated poorly because there draws a fine line between being a journalist and being a blogger. Yeah. And bloggers want to be journalists. And I think that's a very different thing. And they want to be treated the same way as, you know, someone that's worked at, you know, a newspaper for 25 years. Absolutely, they deserve all the respect, but when they don't do the proper fact checking and some things are embellished and it's not the same, it's hard to give them the same respect. Some bloggers absolutely do a fantastic job, but like everything else, it gets mixed in with the mix of bloggers. I mean, how many blogs do you actually read? You actually probably only read like one or two because they're really good. So it was just us sort of sorting through the bad bloggers.
And do you find that, is there anything that's particularly misunderstood about you? Like, would you want to say, you know, this is not true? Or
I mean, I don't know. Most of the things, if you read anything, probably are true. You know, and I've definitely had issues with my temper.
Well, you started out with a noodle bar, and you kind of were struggling with trying to, I guess, because of the advice of certain people, conforming to certain things that you would normally find in a Japanese restaurant, like gyoza or whatever. And then you didn't have a lot of success in the beginning, and then when you kind of decided to do your own thing, that's when you...
No, it's the open kitchen.
It's the open kitchen.
Terrible things have been done to me in an open kitchen. And when somebody messes up repeatedly, there's only so much aggressive whispering you can do.
Yeah.
Seriously, you know, it's like when I see that mother in like the shopping mall, like totally disheveled, and like one kid's hanging off her arm and she's yelling at the other one, but you know she doesn't want to yell, and there are other people like, what is wrong with this woman? She's being a terrible mother. I understand now, you know, like why you do that, because at a certain point, everyone's patience breaks, and it's running daycare.
Yeah.
And
so you have open restaurants in not that many places. You have one, several in New York, but you have one in Sydney and one here. Why Toronto?
Well, we were given an opportunity to open up in this great space that you know, that's just down University, and there are very few opportunities where I myself or the restaurant would be given to open up basically anything we wanted to open up in a new building. And it sounds really simple and maybe mundane, but in New York, it's a battle. It's so hard to find a space. It sucks, really. You know, ceiling. I mean, you know, even in Sydney, it was like, okay, here you can open up your dream kitchen, and you can do 30 seats. It was like, okay, because New York is so difficult, I'll travel 21 hours just to do that. And Toronto, I think, has a burgeoning food scene, and I also have a lot of guys that don't want to live in New York anymore. And Toronto's a great place, and a lot of guys wanted to move up here and start families. So it dovetailed into a right moment for us where people wanted better food, or the food scene was really rapidly changing. And somebody gave us this huge building to do whatever we wanted. So it was, for me, a no-brainer. And plus, it was like every time I had come to Toronto, it was always a fun time. Now that I'm here, I never go out because I'm just at the restaurant, so I have no idea what's going on, really. But you know, it was a great time to.
How much time have you spent here in Toronto?
I don't know, like since we opened, 4 months.
Oh wow! So you.
But I really haven't seen anything. I mean, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Lucky Peach for a second. What made you get into publishing? Because that's a bit of a strange turn. I mean, for most people. Most chefs, I should say.
Yeah, Lucky Peach, like everything, just sort of happens out as an accident with us. It was supposed to be an app. That app never happened. But we had filmed all this stuff. So the guys at ZPZ were like, we were having a lot of problems with the developers of the app because they totally fucked us. And they did. If the guy was sitting right there, I would do terrible things to him. But we had all this footage, so it was just like, all right, let's do this. And Peter Meehan, who's my writing partner and sort of Irish brother that I never had, he basically very quickly stated that there's so many more stories that are better told in print than visually. And I was like, of course, that makes total sense. And then we had just finished doing, something foolish with McSweeney's. They had printed something called a Panorama, and that was like a 1,500-page newspaper, like one edition. And we had a little bit of ramen in there, and we got to know Chris Young pretty well, who was the editor of McSweeney's. And then it was supposed to be a companion to the first app. We really believed in multimedia. And now we only do, print. And it honestly, that's the story. That's the genesis of it all. It was, all right, how do we take something that we want to do and have a fun time? And honestly, if we had to do it all over again, I don't think, this is just to show you that we had no idea what we were doing. With a quarterly, I didn't even think we knew it was a quarterly. We wouldn't have made it 167 pages with no ads. It's a lot.
It is.
For a staff at the time that was like 4 people. So it just happened. Yeah.
You like taking on a lot of stuff, clearly.
Yeah.
You like to stay busy. Okay, so I have a few questions for you. Don't think too hard about it, okay? So what's your non-food related movie?
Wow. That's tough. I mean, it depends what mood I'm on, but obviously, I think people know that I love Roadhouse just because it's. I love
also
all
love
bad
Roadhouse.
movies, but there's something to be said about really bad movies that are just great. They just
Yeah.
don't. You can't.
At home, we call that a bronze turd.
Bronze turd.
A bronze
Well,
turd. Yeah,
well,
it's a turd, but it's got a fine coating of bronze on it. That for Roadhouse is a perfect example of
it's
a
so
bronze turd.
bad. Like I really believe the Coen brothers directed it frame by frame. People would think it's like the greatest piece of cinema ever.
So, what is your you have one food that you are trapped on a desert island. What is the food that you would have with you that you can only eat that for the rest
That's
of your life?
that's an impossible question. I don't know. If I'm gonna it seems like I'm gonna die on this island. I'm gonna die in extravagance. So I'll just say, like beluga caviar, since I haven't had that in a long time. Caviar is like my one, like true guilty pleasure.
What about a late night drunken treat?
Oh man, chicken fingers. I'm a sucker for anything chicken, but like, I mean, anything. I remember in college, like chicken rings and delicious. It's terrible. I shouldn't be saying all this stuff, but.
Do you have any non-food related hobbies?
I like to go fishing. I like to fly fish. I like to do anything where I don't have to think about work. And that's the one thing where if I'm on the river somewhere, there's no cell phone reception, and I can just enjoy not catching fish.
Do you have a favorite place to travel and why?
I like the Rockies completely from the Canada all the way down to America. I just think it's beautiful. I think for me, it's one of the most beautiful places. So that's where I tend to, if I have time in the summer, that's where I go, or in the winter to go skiing as well. But in my right off the top of my head, I'd say, the entire Rocky Mountain Range. Yeah.
So I don't want to keep you up too much longer, but I'll ask one more question before we turn it over to the audience. If you have one piece of advice, I think I know the answer to this already, for people who are ignoring you, say, no, I don't want to give up on cooking, what piece of advice would you give to a fledgling cook who has already ignored your advice to give up on it?
I think the best piece of advice for any cook is to really make mistakes and to criticize yourself incessantly, and to know that you have to be your worst critic. Beat yourself up before the chef beats you up. Don't wait for a critic to review your restaurant. You should know where it stands before that happens. You have to hold yourself to the highest standards, and there is something beautiful about cooking where if you make something right and you bring joy, you bring nourishment, which is something why I love this movie so much. It talks about to me it's the complexity of home cooking, which is nourishing, versus feeding people on a professional level. Something that I have a hard time making the distinction out of. And at the end of the day, like, how much do you love it? Because there are going to be days where you don't love it. But you have to love the concept of it. You can't be thrown off by all the media, all the fact that you're going to get paid nothing. You really have to love it. You have to love no matter what kind of cuisine it is, and that mistake, and make good mistakes. And I guess I'll leave it at that, is when you're making mistakes, you're learning. And that's something I don't see nearly enough. I don't think cooks make enough mistakes and try not to make the same mistake twice. But it's something that I could talk a lot about. But just knowing that you're never good enough is always probably the best advice I can give. And work at the best restaurants, and be patient. And that's something that I'm not patient, so it's really hard. But it's a craft, and it's something that I feel that is being watered down a tremendous amount. So, you know, and that's why I tell people to quit, because I want I don't want the posers in the kitchen. You know.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so let's turn it over to you guys. I think we have some volunteers on the side who have microphones. So please, when you are asked when you want to ask a question, say it into the mic, because otherwise we can't hear you. So, any hands? Oh, there's one.
Hello. I have two questions. So the first question, ramen has really been popping up in Toronto. Like within the same blocks, there'd be 4 ramen shops. And traditionally in Japan, ramen is kind of like a fast food. You go in, you eat, and then you leave. North American food culture is more like you sit down for a meal, you talk, and you enjoy it with friends. Like, do you feel that ramen is ever going to get to the point where it's more like a convenient food, or is the North America culture going to kind of stay that way?
It might take a few hundred years. No, I say that jokingly, and I say that very seriously. People eat noodles differently in America. If you go to a really good ramen-ya in Tokyo or anywhere in Japan, you're not going to hear anything but like this slurping sound. And it's deafening, and it's a little bit off-putting, but you're just like, okay, this is business, let's do this. There's no talking. Like, you put your order in, and you're in. Here, it's different. It's like, put my order in, have a drink, check my text message, you know, wait till the broth cools down, you know, and by the time you get in, you complain that the noodles are overcooked. It's because the noodles are still cooking. And I would say that the two different, you know, ramen it's just noodles and soup, right? Everybody loves that. But it's interesting to me that I am not an anthropologist or sociologist. I don't even know what those mean, really. But all I know is that for most Asians, they seem to drink the soup first, and the noodles are almost secondary. And everyone that's not Asian seems to eat the noodles first and the soup
I do the broth
last.
first. I'm Asian.
Yeah. And I have no idea. It could be 50-50. It's just me being biased. But I think that, you know, in Asia, you just don't wait, and you have to be really careful. I can say for sure, you can serve ramen at a much higher temperature than you can in America. I mean, boiling hot, lawsuit waiting to happen. Because a lot of the good ramen shops, they keep a layer of fat on top. And it could be 212 degrees, and you have no idea. Because it's just looking like it's a, you know, calm bowl of soup. Steaming, yeah. Yes, and then you blow your face off. But you're still supposed to eat it as fast as humanly possible. Here it's just more like, you know, we've had to figure out, at least at Momofuku, the right temperature and the right salt content, which is why I like Kuei-Mei so much, and I always have. It's just been hard to convince people to eat cold ramen in a very concentrated broth. I actually don't love traditional ramen as much as I used to, because unless the broth is heavily seasoned, the noodles need a coating. And I mean, it's different. It's got to be this nice balance. But I don't know. I'm just going off.
You had a second part to your question?
And I guess it's about managing your new restaurant. So in your old restaurant, you started off, like some of the people that have been working for you have been working with you for a long time. Do you find that it's different when you open your shop in Toronto? Like, did you come across as kind of like celebrity, you know, David Chang, and people treat you differently as opposed to your old people at your old restaurants?
I hope not. And I think there's enough people at the restaurant here that would, if I started acting any other way, they'd tell me I'm full of shit and to get back in line. When we opened up here, it was very different. I think that it was an insane undertaking. We're 6 months into it, and we're still figuring out. We have a lot of improvements to make, and we're getting there. But we have such a good team there that, the way I look at it is my job, if we're going to open up a place, is to help sort of set up the DNA of what the place is going to be. I don't want it a facsimile of what we have in New York. We could have done that, but we chose to let it grow organically and to let the flavors change naturally, just like an accent would in English. It's just different. You can't force it, and we're in it for the long haul. So that's what we try to make decisions that are going to benefit the restaurant managerially, or even an ingredient that we use to just sort of see how it's going to evolve over a period of time naturally. So again, we're trying to intentionally make mistakes. Sometimes we make too many, but that's what we do at our restaurant. That's the only thing I think we're really good at.
Next question.
At what age did cooking become the big deal for you?
I had always wanted to be in the restaurant industry, but cooking became a much bigger deal when, I realized I think I had like a midlife crisis pretty early on after college. I taught English after Japan, and I got back, and I got a desk job, and that's when I realized I had to do something with my life other than sit behind a desk. No matter how much money I made, it was completely, utterly meaningless. And I didn't know if cooking was actually going to be what I wanted to do. All I knew was, there's this, in theology, there's this like way to find God that's like via negativa. Like, God is not this bottle of water. God is not this box. I was trying to take that approach to my career, no matter how long it took. And I knew that sitting at a desk, being a glorified secretary for how many years or whatever, answering phones or doing whatever, was utterly meaningless. And I had to do something that I at least enjoyed doing, and working with my hands and making food and trying to make a profession out of that. That's when it got serious. And then when I found out and I got into the kitchens that I wanted, and then I realized that you could act like a total buffoon all day long, yet still be deadly serious when things are coming. It was just sort of a dream. I was like, you can make a living, not a great living, but I would rather choose to be happy than be miserable and hungover at my desk all day.
Up here.
Anthony Bourdain, I think in his first book, wrote about that a lot of chefs have contempt for vegetarian cooking, and I'm wondering where you are at that. I know that I haven't been to your restaurant here in Toronto, but in New York, it seemed there maybe was only one non-meat thing on your menu. Have you given any thought to that, and what is that really about?
I mean, I wasn't trying to be antagonistic to vegetarians. It really was just me. We were just strung out because we had been working for like what seemed like 6 months straight, no joke. Not a day off, 16, I don't even know. I lived upstairs. It just was nonstop. And then one day a lady comes in and says, I'm going to sue you for everything you have. You gave me vegetarian broth. You said it was vegetarian broth, but, it's pork. And I was like, I don't know how you could have gotten that information, because we don't serve vegetarian. We don't make a vegetarian broth. I'm just sorry. Like, I'm not lying. It's impossible. And if there could have been miscommunication. Anyway, she became increasingly threatening. So literally the next day, I was just like, in our very tiny menu in our small restaurant, which was 600 square feet, I literally said, fuck it. We're going to, even if it is vegetarian, we're going to tell people it's not vegetarian. Because you're in New York City. It's like we're sandwiched between a natural hippie supermarket, so we get a lot of vegetarians next door, And then there's like vegetarian restaurants all around us. Like, does every restaurant need to be vegetarian? I was like, you don't go to a sushi restaurant and ask for tempeh. You don't go to a barbecue restaurant and ask for, salad or, vegetarian options. I mean, that's if we were the only restaurant serving the only like one town for like hundreds of miles, certainly we would make exceptions. But at the time we were 27-seat restaurants cramped in the size of one car garage. There's only so much cooking we could do, and I'm not going to set aside hours of mise en place just to make one person happy. I would much rather they never come to our restaurant.
Well, am I on?
And
I
it's not because I don't
appreciate
want-
your honesty, but it's just that for some of us, we'd be thrilled to be able to take advantage of your expertise and your creativity.
No,
but
and we
with
do
some
have we do
vegetarian.
we do cook. A lot of it was and still is just space. If you saw the first restaurant, you would be shocked at how it even worked. We just didn't even have the luxury. We had ginger scallion noodle. That to this day remains the only vegetarian option, vegan option. Not vegetarian, no. Just vegetarian, not vegan. But, give us a space. In Sydney, we opened up. Even here in Toronto, we have spacious kitchens. We have room. We can accommodate any request. It's not that we don't want to. It's just like, it's our need. If you have a dietary restriction, that we'll try our best. But for the first few years, we just didn't have the space, and it just took a life of its own that we didn't like vegetarians. But very fact, I would love to cook for vegetarians. We do, but it just there's other restaurants out there too that can handle the needs. But give us more space and we'll do it, and that's what's happening.
There's another question over here. Let's get off the topic of vegetarian, unless this one is also about it.
No, it's not about vegetarians.
Perfect.
I really don't care. I read the issue of Lucky Peach where you talked a lot about authenticity, and especially after watching this film and talking about ramen shops where people have been doing things the same way for years. I wanted to know what your opinion on authenticity was and whether it has a function in the culinary world and in terms of your own cooking.
I think that authenticity, just in my opinion, has its function, certainly has its function, and it is an antiquated function at that. I think it signifies closed-mindedness. I think it signifies lack of originality. I think it signifies a lot of bad things for me. There's nothing authentic. The pursuit of authenticity, I think, is something that is fool's gold. And what gets lost in the pursuit of authenticity is, are you making delicious food? And are you trying to support local farmers? Are you trying to support different things? Like, it doesn't have to be authentic. And I don't even need to go into the science of it, but let's just say there's a restaurant that serves authentic European ham with authentic European dish and authentic European wine. There's nothing authentic about it. It's the dumbest concept I've ever heard, because you're not using the water, the air is different, the terroir is different. They're certainly not. You're not using the same ingredients, so you can use it as. It's like the best thing you can say about authentic in a restaurant is that they should change it to authentic to based on a true story, because that's what it is. And I think that it limits our scope in terms of creatively trying to make something better, because we're just trying to repeat and do something that was already done. So that's, I'm not trying to talk forever about it, but.
I'm looking for the glow stick. Oh, here, don't even need it.
I can yell. I'd love to hear your comments in regards to all these food reality TV shows.
I have been on a few as a judge, and it is a total trip. And for a while, I would make fun of it, and I think it's so easy to make fun of reality TV. I do it all the time, and I'm the biggest hypocrite. because I've been a judge on these shows. But then you take a step back and you look, and is it making people more aware of food? Absolutely. And you could make a list of pros and cons. And I think the positives from reality food TV, as strange as it may be, definitely outweigh the negatives. So I can't really be opposed to that.
Thank you. So I ordered a Toronto-specific dish, the very spicy noodles, and my waiter told me that there was a very awesome story behind the creation of that dish, and I was hoping you'd share that story with us.
We had a dish called We have a dish called Very Spicy Noodles. It's such a obnoxious name. I'm sorry. We had a dish called Spicy Sichuan Noodles, or something along those lines. And it's pretty spicy. But more people were complaining that it wasn't spicy enough. And I was just like, what's going on? They got a bottle of sriracha in front of them. They're still eating it, and I think they're enjoying it. But they're complaining, and not just complaining, like really upset that it's mislabeled as spicy. So I was like, okay, there's no way. We're just going to make it insanely spicy. And we're going to add whatever flavors we can to like help deliver that spice. So without like getting, crazy peppers, it's all chili. It's chili. It's like fresh chili, fresh Thai bird chili, Korean chili peppers, like all sorts of chili. People still think it's not spicy enough. But some people think it's way too spicy. So, I've just given up. I was actually, when I came back a couple days ago, I had to taste the very spicy noodles myself. And then it was even amongst all like the guys at Noodle Bar, we were in disagreement, like, oh, that's not spicy. This is not spicy enough. Or to me, I was like, that's crazy spicy. So that's pretty much the story. It was like, oh yeah, even amongst us, it was like, let's make the spiciest dish we can make without getting, insane, like the crazy pepper that will send you to the hospital. So that was sort of it was not even a joke, but that's the story behind it, more or less. And it's still not spicy enough.
Over here?
Oh. Hi, I have a question. One of the pieces of advice you gave was to work in the best restaurants that you can. So what restaurant, what chef was most influential on you and why?
So my first job, I was 22 and I was in cooking school, and I felt that I was so behind the curve because I thought you needed to do it when you were 15 years old, because I was just working off this French notion that all the great chefs started cooking when they were 13, 15, which they actually did, but I just felt I was behind. So I was working, and I was working for Jean-Georges at Mercer Kitchen, like every day, like it was just insane. But I didn't know a great kitchen until I got to Kraft. And I actually answered phones there because that was the only way I could get in, because my experience and my skill set were so poor that they didn't need me except to peel mushrooms and to chop mirepoix, which is actually probably the most important thing I ever learned. Peeling mushrooms, breaking down bones, doing all that crap work was so exciting to me because I had to make it perfect every time. And it wasn't just one chef, it was a group of chefs. And Kraft opened like 2000, 2001 or something around there. And Tom Colicchio really put together the staff that to this day is very close. Jonathan Beno, who used to be the chef de cuisine and opened up Per Se, was the sous chef, and he really took me under his wing and taught me a lot about food. Akhtar Nawab opened up, was at Kraft Bar, and Marco Canora, Damon Wise, who's opening up Lafayette with Andrew Carmelini, Liz Beno, Dan Sauer. I mean, the list goes on. And almost everybody that opened up that restaurant is a chef today of their own kitchen or has achieved something. And it was amazing because I love being part of teams. I love sports, to be part of a bunch of misfits But once you put on the whites and the kitchen, it was like, we're going to be the best kitchen in the world. And that's infectious. And that's when things totally changed for me. It was like, whatever you're doing, good isn't good enough. And that was really instilled to me then. And that's when I realized, like, I know nothing, and I have to be as good as these guys. So,
Do we have time to squeeze one more in? Oh, here it is.
Hi. What are some of your favorite noodle spots in New York?
Noodle spots. I eat a lot of Sichuan food. I don't, ramen, I'm not really eating out all that much. I don't go out to restaurants all that much in New York. So I couldn't really tell you. I actually have no idea what's going on in New York. I know there's a lot of ramen shops opening up, but I don't know. I've been away for so long here in Sydney that I really haven't spent time. Mission Street Chinese is a place that I had noodles, and Danny makes really good noodles, but I can't tell you. I'm like the worst person to ask for restaurants. That's a terrible question to end on, so I'm sorry.
Terrible question to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming.